Welcome to Sinister Truths. Have you ever stumbled upon a story so forbidden, so scandalous, that it could shatter the image of an entire society? Tonight, we take you back to Savannah, Georgia, in 1839, a time of strict societal rules, harsh divides, and hidden passions. Imagine a wealthy widow, bound by status and wealth, making the most shocking choice of her life, marrying the son of her own late slave. It was a union that defied everything people believed possible, a forbidden wedding that would haunt Savannah's whispers for decades. Before we dive into this twisted tale, comment below which country you're watching this video from and what time of day it is. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to uncover more of history's darkest secrets. Welcome to the world of Savannah in 1839, a city of cobblestone streets, moss-draped oaks, and grand mansions that spoke of wealth and unyielding social hierarchy. Among these ornate homes, none stood taller or more imposing than the estate of the widow whose story we are about to unravel. To the casual observer, her life was the embodiment of perfection. The mansion, a sprawling structure of brick and wrought iron, gleamed in the afternoon sun. Its shutters painted a pristine white, its gardens meticulously maintained. Fountains trickled, roses bloomed in ordered rows, and servants moved silently through the halls, tending to every need with quiet obedience. She had inherited the estate from her late husband, a man of significant influence, whose business ventures had made her one of the wealthiest women in the South. Br. Her beauty was legendary in Savannah. With fair skin that seemed to glow under candlelight, chestnut hair cascading in waves over her shoulders, and eyes that held a quiet, unspoken intelligence, she commanded attention wherever she went. Women envied her, not only for her looks but for her status, her wealth, and the freedom that came with widowhood. Freedom many women of her era could only dream of. Yet, behind the elegance, there was a tension, a gnawing emptiness that neither wealth nor admiration could fill. She moved through her life with precision and poise, performing every duty expected of a woman of her standing, but the loneliness of her position was palpable. In her quiet moments, she would stare out over the river, watching the ships glide past, wondering if life could offer her more than the hollow perfection of society's gaze. Every social event was a display, a careful choreography of manners and appearances. She attended lavish dinners, hosted soirees in candlelit halls where music from string quartets floated through the air, and danced with men of influence, all the while maintaining the composed facade expected of a woman in her position. Beneath the layers of silk and lace, however, she felt trapped, constrained by invisible chains that dictated who she could love, whom she could trust, and what choices were deemed acceptable. The societal rules of Savannah were rigged, and any deviation could mean scandal, ruin, or ostracization. The elite observed one another closely, and rumors spread like wildfire, often with devastating consequences. Her late husband's death had left her with not only wealth, but also authority over her estate and the people who lived and worked there. Among them were many African-American slaves, men and women who had served the family for generations. She had grown up with these people, learning their routines, understanding their work, and in some ways, forming bonds that were complex and layered, a mix of dependency, respect, and human connection. She often observed them from the balcony as they moved through the gardens or worked in the kitchens and stables. Life within the estate was an intricate web of power, servitude, and unspoken rules. It was a microcosm of Savannah itself, beautiful on the surface, yet layered with secrets and unacknowledged tensions. As the days passed in quiet repetition, her thoughts turned inward. She reflected on the expectations she carried, the relentless pressure to remain respectable, to maintain appearances, and to ensure that her family's legacy endured. She had no children, and the social chatter about her remaining unmarried grew louder with each passing month. People began to whisper that perhaps she had grown too old for love, that her beauty was fading, or that her heart had hardened with age. None of this, however, captured the true complexity of her desires. She longed not merely for companionship, but for connection on a level society considered dangerous, improper, and in some ways, impossible. She wanted to feel understood, challenged, and admired for who she truly was, beyond the constraints of wealth and status. It was in this environment, rich with tension and anticipation, that the young man entered her life. He was not of her class, nor was he supposed to be someone she noticed. He was the son of a man who had served her family for decades, a man whose presence was familiar yet overlooked, considered part of the background noise of the household. The young man arrived to manage certain aspects of the estate following his father's passing. He was tall, strong, and carried himself with a quiet confidence that drew attention despite his station. There was a sharp intelligence in his eyes, a sense of purpose in the way he moved, and an awareness of the social world he was born into yet forbidden from fully inhabiting. From the moment their paths crossed, there was an unspoken recognition of something rare. She noticed the meticulous way he handled his duties, the subtle way he moved through the household with efficiency and respect. He spoke little at first, but when he did, his words carried weight, a rare combination of thoughtfulness and assertiveness that set him apart. For her, it was startling, even disconcerting. She was accustomed to people who flattered or obeyed her unquestioningly, and here was someone who inspired both admire and a quiet, unsettling curiosity. She began to find herself observing him more often, watching him in ways she had not allowed herself to watch anyone in years. It was the beginning of a spark, small yet undeniable, that would eventually ignite into something society could not condone. Even within the strict boundaries of Savannah society, emotions have a way of breaking through, and hers were no exception. As she navigated her daily routines, she felt a subtle tension building, an awareness that the ordinary rhythms of estate life were about to be disrupted. This young man, whose name she barely knew at first, had stirred something deep within her, challenging her notions of propriety and reshaping her understanding of desire. The initial fascination grew steadily, a quiet insistence that demanded attention, reflection, and eventually, action. She could no longer ignore the pull she felt, the dangerous allure of connection with someone so socially and racially forbidden. The estate itself seemed to respond to this shift in her consciousness. Rooms that had always felt empty and lifeless now seemed charged with anticipation. The gardens, once just a display of order, became a backdrop for stolen glances, fleeting conversations, and the subtle dance of unacknowledged attraction. Every corridor, staircase, and balcony carried the potential for encounters that defied convention, and she could feel the weight of history pressing down on them both. Every decision she made now carried consequences beyond her imagination, yet she felt compelled to explore this path, driven by curiosity, longing, and a quiet rebellion against the limitations imposed upon her. Even as the whispers of Savannah society loomed in the distance, she could not deny the thrill of possibility. The young man represented not just desire, but freedom from the invisible shackles of expectation. She began to imagine a life beyond the narrow confines of propriety, a life in which she could pursue connection and passion without fear. The notion was both terrifying and exhilarating, as she knew the risks involved, yet could not resist the pull of something so fundamentally human. Love, companionship, and the audacity to challenge the world itself. Her loneliness, once a constant companion, became the catalyst for a dangerous curiosity. She wondered if, by allowing herself to explore this forbidden attraction, she might finally experience life as she truly wished. In the quiet moments of the evening, as candles flickered and the estate settled into stillness, she would recall his eyes, the calm strength in his voice, and the subtle but unmistakable presence that seemed to linger even after he had left the room. Each encounter, however fleeting, left her longing for more, and the walls she had built around herself for decades began to crack, revealing the vulnerable, passionate woman beneath the carefully maintained exterior. Even as the days passed, the widow's fascination with the young man only grew stronger. She could not stop thinking about him, replaying every brief interaction in her mind with the intensity of someone discovering a new world. Each glance, each word, each quiet gesture carried meaning beyond what society would allow her to acknowledge. She found herself walking the halls of her mansion with a heightened awareness, anticipating the moments when their paths might cross. Sometimes she imagined conversations that had never happened, the what-ifs whispering in the back of her mind like a tempting secret. There was a thrill in the forbidden nature of her thoughts, a danger that was both exhilarating and terrifying. The young man, for his part, was acutely aware of the boundaries imposed by the rigid social structure of Savannah. He knew his station, the expectations, and the unspoken rules that dictated how he could interact with the widow. Yet, despite the risk, He could not ignore the way she seemed to notice him in ways others did not. There was a subtle intelligence in her attention, a curiosity that went beyond superficial observation. He began to sense that she was different from the rest of the elite, that behind her poised exterior was a woman capable of defying convention, of seeing beyond wealth, color, and social status. This recognition created a quiet bond between them, a connection forged in glances, gestures, and shared silences. The estate, with all its grandeur and history, became the stage for their growing intrigue. They moved through the same spaces daily: grand dining rooms, sun-drenched gardens, dimly lit corridors. But each encounter now carried an unspoken tension. Their interactions were measured, careful, yet charged with the electricity of possibility. For the widow, every word he spoke seemed to resonate on multiple levels, speaking not only to her intellect but to her heart. For him, her attention was both a privilege and a source of anxiety, as he navigated the fine line between propriety and desire. The social expectations surrounding them weighed heavily on both. Savannah was a city of appearances, where reputations were meticulously maintained, and gossip traveled faster than the wind through the Spanish moss. The widow understood that any hint of impropriety could ruin her, socially and financially. Yet, the pull she felt toward this young man was undeniable, a force that challenged every lesson she had been taught about the limits of her position. She began to question the rules that had governed her life, wondering if true happiness could ever be found within the narrow confines of society's expectations. Their secret fascination slowly began to shape their days. She found reasons to speak with him, asking questions about the estate, seeking advice, and occasionally lingering longer than necessary in casual conversation. Each interaction carried a risk, yet she could not resist the connection that had quietly formed. He too found excuses to engage, offering insight, assistance, and subtle acts of attention that conveyed a respect and admiration uncommon in his world. Their exchanges, though seemingly ordinary to anyone observing, were imbued with an intensity that neither could fully articulate. In the quiet of her private chambers, the widow allowed herself to reflect on what these feelings meant. She considered the societal consequences, the judgment of friends and family, and the potential scandal that could ensue if anyone discovered the depth of their connection. And yet, the thought of suppressing her desires entirely was unbearable. It became increasingly clear that her attraction was not merely fleeting. It was a profound awakening, a stirring of emotions long dormant beneath the weight of duty and expectation. She recognized that to ignore it would be to deny herself a chance at a life fully lived, even if the consequences were severe. At the same time, she was acutely aware of the historical context in which they lived. The system of slavery had created rigid hierarchies, and the widow had grown up within this framework. The young man's presence challenged not only her personal desires, but also the very foundations of her understanding of social order. She found herself grappling with conflicting emotions: admiration, longing, fear, and guilt, all intertwining in a complex web that defied simple explanation. Every encounter forced her to confront the limitations imposed on her by birth and status, as well as the broader injustices that governed the lives of those around her. Despite these conflicts, a quiet determination began to emerge. The widow realized that her life, though privileged, had been circumscribed by rules she had never fully chosen. Her connection with the young man, though dangerous, represented a chance to reclaim agency over her own desires. It was an awakening that frightened her as much as it exhilarated her, but she could no longer ignore it. She began to imagine a life in which she could T on her instincts, follow her heart, and challenge the rigid structures that had confined her for so long. The young man, too, was undergoing a transformation. He had grown up in the shadow of the widow's family, aware of the limitations imposed upon him by society, yet he had always carried a quiet resilience, a sense of purpose that set him apart. Her attention validated his intelligence, skill, and humanity in a way that few others had. He began to recognize that his life could hold possibilities he had never dared to imagine, that connections could transcend the boundaries of class and race, even in a society as unforgiving as Savannah. Each encounter with her reinforced this awareness, strengthening a bond that was as delicate as it was dangerous. Their interactions, though still constrained by societal expectations, became increasingly layered with unspoken understanding. A glance across the room, a shared moment in the garden, or a subtle acknowledgement in passing spoke volume that words could not capture. These moments, though fleeting, created a foundation for trust, admiration, and something deeper, an emotional intimacy that defied the rigid rules of 1839 Savannah. For both, it was a revelation, a recognition that human connection could exist even in the most restrictive circumstances, that love, desire, and companionship were forces not easily contained. As days turned into weeks, the widow found herself contemplating a future she had never dared to envision. She thought about the young man not as a subordinate, not as a reflection of her family's past, but as a partner in a shared life, someone who could challenge her, inspire her, and awaken parts of her soul that had lain dormant for decades. It was a radical notion, one that defied everything she had been taught, yet it felt undeniably right. In these quiet moments of reflection, she allowed herself to imagine a life that embraced possibility, that acknowledged her desires, and that dared to confront the constraints of her world. Her fascination was no longer simply curiosity. It had become a force, a quiet but persistent insistence that demanded attention. She began to see the young man everywhere, in the quiet spaces of her estate, in the shadows of her thoughts, and in the possibilities of a life that could exist beyond convention. The allure of this forbidden connection was irresistible, a tantalizing promise of love, freedom, and the courage to defy a society that sought to dictate every aspect of her existence. Each day brought new awareness, new longing, and a growing realization that she could no longer live within the confines of expectation, without acknowledging the desires that had taken root within her. By the time she fully recognized the depth of her feelings, the course of her life had already begun to shift. The widow's careful, controlled existence, once defined by wealth, propriety, and societal expectation, was now infused with possibility, danger, and the intoxicating allure of forbidden desire. Every choice, every glance, and every conversation carried consequences that could change the trajectory of her life forever. And yet, despite the risks, she could not resist the pull of what had begun in those first quiet encounters, the quiet awakening of a heart that dared to imagine love beyond the boundaries of Savannah's rigid social order. From the very first moments their paths crossed, the widow felt an unfamiliar stirring within her, a sensation that was equal parts fear and fascination. At first, it was subtle, barely noticeable, a quickening of her pulse when their eyes met across a crowded room, or a twinge of curiosity when he approached to discuss matters of the estate. Yet, as days turned into weeks, the awareness of his presence became unavoidable. The young man carried himself with a confidence that was quiet but undeniable, a strength that seemed to resonate on some deeper level she could not articulate. He was intelligent, observer, and skilled, and every action he took seemed to reflect not just competence, but a natural dignity that demanded recognition. She had grown up seeing men of her station, men trained in wealth and influence, yet none had struck her with the subtle force of this young man's character. What made the connection between them so dangerous and so irresistible was precisely the world in which they lived. Savannah, like much of the South, was a place of rigid divisions. Lines of race, class, and propriety were drawn with precision, and crossing them was unthinkable. To love him openly would be unthinkable, scandalous, and punishable by societal exile, if not outright ridicule. Yet the more she tried to suppress her feelings, the stronger they grew. There was a magnetic pull in his presence, a sense of recognition that transcended the limitations imposed upon them. She found herself looking for him in the corridors, lingering by the windows where she might catch a glimpse of him in the guard, and inventing errands simply to pass through the areas where he worked. Each encounter was charged with a subtle intensity, a quiet acknowledgement that something extraordinary was unfolding between them. For the young man, the awareness of her attention was both thrilling and terrifying. He understood the stakes, the potential fallout of even the smallest hint of impropriety. Yet he could not deny the attraction that grew with each glance, each conversation, each shared silence. He had spent his entire life navigating the boundaries of a society that placed him in a subordinate position. Yet in her presence, those boundaries seemed to shift, if only slightly. There was a rare recognition in her eyes, a curiosity that mirrored his own, and for the first time he felt as though someone of her world saw him not merely as a servant or a shadow of the household, but as a person with worth, intelligence, and depth. Their early interactions were cautious, deliberate, and measured. In Public spaces, they maintained the strictest propriety, exchanging only the necessary words to conduct business or manage the estate. Yet in the private corners of the mansion, the library after dinner, the quiet garden paths in the late afternoon, there was a subtle dance of attention and recognition. A word, a glance, a touch of the hand while passing a book, each carried a weight far beyond its apparent simplicity. Every exchange was a risk, yet the thrill of the forbidden made the danger intoxicating. The widow began to notice small changes within herself. Her heart raced at the mere sound of his footsteps. Her mind lingered on imagined conversations, and a longing took root that defied the rules she had spent a lifetime observing. The whispers of Savannah society loomed in the background like a persistent shadow. She knew the eyes of the elite were everywhere, and that any hint of impropriety could trigger scandal, condemnation, or even threats to her safety and position. Yet the lure of connection, of genuine intimacy, was too powerful to resist. Every secret glance across a room, every fleeting conversation in a secluded hallway, became a charged moment, a testament to the unspoken bond developing between them. There was a tension in the air that neither could ignore, a silent acknowledgement that their relationship was moving beyond the boundaries of ordinary interaction. In these moments, they began to see each other differently. The widow, accustomed to men who flattered her or respected her purely out of obligation, now saw someone capable of challenging her intellect and touching her heart. His thoughts, observations, and quiet humor revealed a depth she had not encountered in years. She began to admire his resilience, his cleverness, and the way he navigated the constraints of a society designed to limit him. Each interaction revealed new layers of character, and with every revelation, her fascination grew stronger. For the young man, the widow reprise ented more than wealth or status. She embodied a curiosity and strength he had never seen in women of her world, a willingness to think independently, to question norms, and to engage with him as an equal in ways that were almost revolutionary for their time. Her attention was not the hollow admiration of her peers, it was genuine, thoughtful, and deeply affecting. He found himself drawn not only to her beauty and elegance but to her mind, her presence, and the subtle audacity of a woman who, despite societal constraints, was beginning to recognize the possibilities beyond them. Their growing connection was punctuated by moments of intimacy, small and fleeting but charged with meaning. A hand brushing against another while retrieving a document, a lingering look during a shared task in the garden, a whispered word in passing, all became profound markers of a bond developing in the shadows of propriety. The widow, despite herself, began to dream of scenarios that would have been unimagined. Able a few weeks prior, walks in the evening gardens, private conversations by candlelight, shared confidences that allowed them to know one another beyond the expectations of their social roles. The young man, too, found his imagination consumed by thoughts of what might be possible, even as he navigated the dangers of acting on those feelings in a society that would not tolerate such transgressions. There were times when the risk seemed too great, when the reality of their situation forced them to retreat into silence. Savannah was a city where reputations could be destroyed with a word, where scandal could ruin generations, and where the constraints of race and class were enforced with relentless precision. Yet, even in these moments of restraint, their awareness of each other lingered. The widow would find herself replaying moments in her mind, imagining what might have been said, what gestures had conveyed, and what possibilities lay just beyond the reach of her courage. The young G-man, too, carried the memory of these encounters, a mixture of desire, longing, and apprehension that made every meeting both precious and perilous. As their connection deepened, they began to rely on subtle forms of communication, glances across a crowded room, small gestures that conveyed understanding, and the quiet sharing of moments that would go unnoticed by anyone else. These interactions, while seemingly innocuous to outsiders, became the fabric of their burgeoning intimacy. Each exchange strengthened their bond, creating a private world within the rigid structures of Savannah society. The thrill of the forbidden, coupled with the depth of their mutual respect and admiration, fueled a connection that neither could ignore, and that neither would have dared to pursue openly. The widow began to recognize that her feelings were no longer fleeting curiosities. She felt a growing sense of inevitability, a recognition that this young man had entered her life for reasons beyond chance. His presence challenged her to reconsider the rules that had governed her existence, and to question the constraints placed upon women of her station. She began to see herself not merely as a widow constrained by wealth and propriety, but as a woman capable of choice, agency, and daring. The young man, too, began to realize that his connection with her was extraordinary, a rare recognition of his worth and humanity that could not be ignored. Over time, the intensity of their mutual fascination grew into something more profound, an emotional intimacy that neither had anticipated but both acknowledged. They began to share thoughts, feelings, and reflections that transcended the ordinary confines of employer and employee, master and subordinate. Conversations that began as practical discussions about the estate slowly evolved into exchanges of philosophy, personal reflection, and subtle flirtation. Each moment together carried a weight, a significance that neither could articulate full, yet both understood implicitly. It was a love that could not be named, yet it existed in every glance, every gesture, and every word spoken in the quiet corners of their world. This forbidden spark, once ignited, began to shape the rhythms of their days. The widow found herself moving through the estate with a heightened awareness, anticipating encounters, remembering previous conversations, and cherishing moments that might otherwise have passed unnoticed. The young man, too, became attuned to her presence, aware of the subtle changes in tone, expression, and movement that signaled attention, curiosity, or desire. Each day brought new tension, new excitement, and new recognition of the extraordinary bond forming between them, a bond that defied the rigid social structures, racial hierarchies, and moral strictures of 1839 Savannah. The growing intimacy did not go unnoticed by those closest to the widow. Certain members of her household began to sense the unusual attention she paid. To the young man, though they could not discern its nature, whispers circulated quietly among the staff, creating a tension that both intrigued and alarmed the couple. Yet, the widow and the young man navigated these risks with subtlety and intelligence, maintaining appearances while exploring the uncharted territory of their emotions. The stakes were high, the consequences potentially devastating, and yet the allure of connection, of mutual understanding and forbidden desire, proved irresistible. As the seasons changed, the intensity of their bond deepened. Summer days filled with labor in the gardens, long walks along the estate's perimeters, and quiet evenings in candlelit rooms became opportunities to nurture their connection. They found comfort in shared silences, trust in one another's discretion, and joy in the rare moments when the world outside seemed to disappear. Each encounter strengthened their awareness of the extraordinary nature of what they shared, a connection that transcended societal norms, family expectations, and the rigid divisions of class and race. The forbidden love that had begun as fascination slowly blossomed into a profound and undeniable attachment. Both the widow and the young man were transformed by it, challenged by it, and exhilarated by it. They understood, in ways no one else could, that their connection was not merely a transgression. It was a testament to the human heart's capacity to seek companionship, understanding, and love in the face of impossible odds. In the shadows of Savannah society, who prided themselves on knowing every detail of the elite's lives. At first, it was only whispers, subtle hints exchanged behind hands and over teacups, little rumors that could be dismissed if questioned. But as the days turned into weeks, the murmurs gathered momentum, their tone shifting from speculation to scandal. Friends of the widow, neighbors, and even distant acquaintances began to notice the subtle changes in her behavior. The lingering glances, the private walks in the gardens, the unexpected attentiveness to someone far below her station. It was enough to spark curiosity, concern, and eventually, outrage. Society in Savannah operated on rigid rules of propriety, respectability, and reputation, particularly for women of wealth and status. The widow had long been considered a model of grace and refinement, a figure admired for her beauty, wealth, and poise. For decades she had navigated the complex social landscape with precision, performing her role without error. Now, however, the careful facade she had maintained was showing cracks. Observers began to whisper about the peculiar attentions she paid to her late slave's son. Some dismissed it as an innocent familiarity, a kindness toward someone who had lost his father and now carried responsibilities on the estate. Others, however, viewed it as audacious, dangerous, and a breach of every expectation Savannah society demanded. The whispers quickly became conversation, and conversation became confrontation. At social gatherings, the widow felt the eyes of her peers, the sharp stares and hushed comments. weighing on her like invisible chains. People she had once considered friends began to behave with cautious distance, their greetings formal and cold. Letters circulated, carefully worded to convey concern without outright accusation, and there were even rumors that family members of the widow's late husband were considering intervention. The world she had moved through with confidence now seemed fraught with peril, a society ready to pounce on the first misstep. The young man, aware of the growing attention, was equally cautious. He understood the danger of even the slightest hint of impropriety. To be caught in a compromising position with a woman of wealth could ruin him, perhaps even endanger his life. Yet despite the warnings and the ever-present threat of scandal, he could not ignore the connection they shared. Every time he saw the widow, there was a tension that both exhilarated and terrified him. He had grown up knowing the limits of his world, understanding the boundaries imposed by race and class, yet he now found himself drawn into a realm of passion, longing, and defiance that challenged every lesson he had been taught. Savannah itself seemed to respond to the unfolding scandal. The city, known for its elegance and beauty, was also a place of scrutiny and judgment, where the private lives of the wealthy were monitored as closely as the tides of the river. The murmur about the widow and the young man spread, carried in letters, gossip at markets, and the quiet observations of servants who moved between households. Some found the idea of such a connection unthinkable, a threat to the very fabric of the city's order. Others were fascinated, secretly rooting for a forbidden love that defied convention, intrigued by the audacity of a woman willing to challenge societal norms. Within the widow's household, the tension grew palpable. Servants exchanged furtive glances and whispered in corners, speculating on the nature of the bond forming between their mistress and the young man. Some were sympathetic, recognizing the humanity and longing behind what outsiders would label scandal. Others were uneasy, worried about the consequences of being associated with such a breach of propriety. The young man, ever careful, navigated these dynamics with skill, aware that even the slightest misstep could provoke suspicion or gossip. Every word, every gesture, every interaction was measured with the precision of someone walking a tightrope, balancing desire with the need for secrecy. The widow herself felt the weight of societal scrutiny in every action she took. Once, she had moved through the world with confidence, secure in her beauty, wealth, and social standing. Now, she was acutely aware of the judgments, the whispers, and the silent expectations pressing upon her. Friends and acquaintances began to treat her differently, some with pity, others with quiet disapproval. Invitations to social events became scarce, and letters from relatives were filled with subtle admonishments. Even the staff, loyal as they were, could not fully shield her from the consequences of societal eyes that were always watching. The scandal, once confined to whispers, began to take a more concrete form. Local newspapers, hungry for stories that would titillate readers, hinted at irregularities within the household. They spoke of the widow's unusual attentions to a young man of lower station, avoiding outright accusation but carefully suggesting impropriety. Friends of the widow's late husband circulated letters warning of the danger to her reputation, urging caution and discretion. Even those who had admired her from afar now began to question her judgment, framing her actions as reckless and unbecoming of a woman of her stature. Despite the pressure, the widow refused to suppress the connection entirely. She understood the risks, but the growing bond with the young man had become a lifeline, a source of emotional fulfillment she could not ignore. Each encounter, however brief or subtle, reinforced the undeniable reality of their attraction. They communicated through gestures, glances, and shared tasks, finding private moments that allowed them to connect, without drawing the scrutiny of prying eyes. Every interaction was a calculated risk, yet the thrill of the forbidden made it irresistible. The public's fascination with the story grew, turning what began as whispers into a citywide intrigue. People speculated about the nature of their relationship, some condemning it outright, others secretly admiring the courage it took to defy societal norms. Conversations in drawing rooms, at markets, and along the riverfront were punctuated with references to the widow's peculiar attentions, the young man's unusual confidence, and the audacity of a bond that crossed both class and race. It became clear that the story would not remain private. It had entered the collective consciousness of Savannah, challenging assumptions, provoking outrage, and inspiring curiosity. Even within the estate, the tension was undeniable. Every movement, every glance, every exchange carried weight, a significance magnified by the knowledge that the world was watching. The widow, aware of the consequences, navigated her days with a delicate balance of propriety and desire, never fully able to relax in the presence of the young man. He too understood stakes, maintaining an outward composure while internally grappling with the intensity of their connection. The love that had begun in quiet fascination now existed under the weight of societal judgment, transforming ordinary moments into acts of courage and defiance. The scandal reached its peak when rumors of private meetings, secret conversations, and stolen moments began to circulate more openly. Friends, family, and neighbors speculated on the depth of their connection, imagining scenarios that neither could confirm nor deny. Some attempted to intervene, sending letters of warning or visiting the widow under the guise of concern, hoping to dissuade her from continuing a path they considered dangerous. Others simply watched, fascinated by the audacity of a woman willing to challenge the norms of her society so openly. Through it all, the widow and the young man remained connected, their bond strengthened by the very scandal that threatened to destroy them. The whispers, letters, and curious glances became part of the rhythm of their days, a constant reminder of the risk inherent in their affection. Yet, rather than deterring them, the pressure seemed to intensify their connection, making each private interaction more precious, more meaningful, and more profound. They had discovered in one another a rare understanding, a shared defiance, and a courage that transcended the fear of societal judgment. In the midst of Savannah's fascination and outrage, the young man demonstrated remarkable composure. He navigated the social terrain with intelligence and restraint, ensuring that no overt evidence of their bond could be discovered. Yet even in the careful management of appearances, the depth of their connection was undeniable. Every glance across the room, every word spoken under the cover of privacy, carried the weight of unspoken desire, rebellion, and mutual admiration. The city may have been scandalized, but in the quiet corners of the estate, love continued to flourish against the odds. The widow, too, had to reconcile the thrill of defiance with the reality of potential consequences. She understood that her reputation, her family's legacy, and her place in society were all at risk. Yet the intensity of her feelings for the young man outweighed the fear. Every stolen moment, every private conversation, every subtle gesture reinforced the truth she could no longer deny. She had found in him a connection that transcended wealth, status, and propriety. It was a love forbidden by every standard of the world around them, yet undeniable in its reality, undeniable in its power. As the scandal deepened, the story became part of Savannah's collective memory. The widow and her companion were the subject of whispered conversation, speculation, and fascination. People debated the morality, the audacity, and the consequences, yet they could not deny the human drama unfolding before them. The city itself seemed to hold its breath, watching as two individuals defied expectation, challenged convention, and dared to pursue a connection society deemed impossible. Through the turbulence of gossip, judgment, and societal scrutiny, the bond between the widow and the young man only grew stronger. Each encounter was an act of courage, a small rebellion against the rigid structures that sought to confine them. The scandal that consumed Savannah was both a threat and a testament, a reflection of the fear and fascination that comes when two hearts challenge the limits of their world. In the shadows of judgment, in the quiet corners of the estate, love persisted, proving that even in the face of outrage and social constraint, human connection could not be extinguished. The scandal was not merely a series of rumors or fleeting gossip. It was a force that reshaped the dynamics of the estate, influenced the perceptions of the city, and tested the limits of courage and desire. For the widow and the young man, it became a crucible in which their love was forged, strengthened by adversity, secrecy, and the constant awareness of the consequences. Every glance, every word, every subtle gesture was amplified by the knowledge that the world watched, and in that intensity their bond deepened, became more resilient, and more profoundly meaningful. Even as Savannah buzzed with speculation, the widow and the young man learned to navigate the perilous landscape of social judgment. They developed strategies, subtle signals, and private spaces where they could nurture their connection without detection. Every moment together became precious, a stolen fragment of a world in which they could truly see one another, free from the relentless scrutiny of a society eager to condemn. The scandal that engulfed Savannah became not just a test of character, but a defining moment in their lives, shaping the path they would follow in pursuit of love, desire, and freedom despite the relentless scrutiny of Savannah society. Despite the whispers that traveled faster than the river currents, the widow and the young man found a way to claim a fragment of the life they desired. Their bond, born from fascination and forged through the tension of forbidden longing, had become impossible to deny. Every stolen glance, every quiet conversation, every fleeting touch had built a foundation that demanded acknowledgement. They knew, as acutely as one might feel the weight of the sun at midday, that their connection could not remain unspoken forever. It was an undeniable truth, one that demanded action despite the immense risk. The planning of their union was a delicate and secretive undertaking. In a society where even the faintest hint of impropriety could destroy reputations and livelihoods, they had to tread with the utmost caution. Invitations were out of the question. The idea of public ceremony, of formal announcements, was unthinkable. Every aspect of the wedding had to be hidden from prying eyes, every detail considered with precision. EY relied only on the most trusted confidants, people who had served the household faithfully for decades and whose discretion was beyond reproach. Every conversation, every arrangement, was conducted in whispers, in the quiet corners of the estate, away from the ears and eyes of those who might betray them. The location chosen for the ceremony was intimate and symbolic. It was a small, secluded chapel on the outskirts of the city, one of the few places where they could hope for privacy. The building itself was old, its stones weathered and softened by decades of rain and sun, yet there was a quiet dignity in its simplicity. It was a place that carried no weight of societal expectation, no association with the elite of Savannah, no witness other than the small number of confidants they dared to include. The walls of the chapel seemed to hold their secrets as easily as they held the soft echoes of hymns long past. The day of the wedding was charged with a tension that was palpable in every breath, every movement. Dawn broke slowly over the city, casting a soft light across the estate as if the world itself hesitated in anticipation. Inside the mansion, the widow prepared herself with care, every detail deliberate. Her gown was modest yet elegant, a reflection of her station yet stripped of the extravagance that would attract attention. It was a symbol of a life both constrained and liberated, a careful balance between propriety and desire. Her hair was arranged simply, her jewelry minimal, chosen not for display but as an extension of herself, a quiet assertion of the woman she had become. The young man, too, prepared with careful attention. His clothing was clean, pressed, and appropriate, yet understated, avoiding any hint of ostentation that might draw attention. He moved through the morning rituals with a quiet determination, aware of the weight of the moment and the significance it held for both of them. In the privacy of his room, he paused to reflect on the path that had led him here, the early fascination, the subtle glances, the stolen moments that had transformed into an unspoken promise. He understood the danger of the day, the scandal that could follow if they were discovered, yet he felt a quiet exhilaration at the thought of finally formalizing their bond. The journey to the chapel was undertaken with the utmost discretion. Only the most trusted servants accompanied them, ensuring that no curious eyes followed. The streets of Savannah, bustling with merchants, laborers, and townspeople, seemed oblivious to the quiet drama unfolding, yet the couple moved with the awareness of how delicate their situation truly was. Every carriage turn, every footstep, every glance over the shoulder was imbued with caution. Even the slightest misstep could provoke suspicion, yet they pressed forward, driven by a desire that had grown too powerful to suppress. Upon arrival, the chapel seemed to embrace them in its quiet, shadowed spaces. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and old stone, a scent that spoke of endurance, secrecy, and the passage of time. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting patterns of color across the floor, illuminating the faces of those few witnesses who had been invited with careful consideration. The atmosphere was intimate, sacred in a way that the grand halls of Savannah could never provide. It was a space in which they could finally claim a measure of freedom, a space where their love could exist unobserved and unjudged. The ceremony itself was simple, yet deeply profound. The words exchanged were deliberate, carefully chosen to convey commitment, respect, and passion without drawing attention to the scandal that lay just beyond the chapel doors. They spoke of loyalty, devotion, and the courage to defy societal constraints. Each vow was heavy with meaning, each gesture a testament to the risks they were willing to take for one another. In that quiet, sunlit space, they acknowledged a bond that had grown from curiosity to fascination, and from fascination to a love that demanded recognition. The witnesses, carefully selected, were the pillars of discretion. They were household staff, and a few trusted confidants who understood the stakes and the profound significance of the moment. Their presence was both reassuring and necessary, ensuring that the union was recognized and validated, even if it would remain hidden from the broader world. These individuals understood the gravity of the act, the rebellion it represented against a society obsessed with status and propriety, and they carried the secret with them, safeguarding the couple from discovery. As the ceremony concluded, a quiet sense of triumph and relief settled over them. The risk had been immense, the danger of exposure real, yet they had claimed a fragment of their destiny with courage and deliberation. The vows they had exchanged were more than words. They were a declaration of defiance, a commit, meant to one another that transcended the rigid boundaries of class, race, and social expectation. In that moment, the world beyond the chapel seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them, bound together in a union that was as profound as it was forbidden. Returning to the estate, the couple carried with them a sense of transformation. The house, once a place of constraint and scrutiny, now held a new energy, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond they had formalized. Every glance, every gesture, every interaction now carried the weight of commitment. Yet the necessity for discretion remained. They navigated the household with a renewed sense of purpose, aware of the tension between public appearance and private reality. Their love existed in the shadows, yet it was no longer abstract or uncertain. It was tangible, real, and undeniable. The reaction among the household staff was a mixture of awe, respect, and caution. Those who had been entrusted with knowledge of the wedding understood its profound implications and the risks involved. Their loyalty became a vital shield, enabling the couple to continue their lives with a degree of normalcy, even as the broader society remained unaware. Within the walls of the mansion, a subtle shift had occurred. The energy of secrecy had transformed into one of solidarity, a quiet understanding that the love of the widow and her companion was to be protected at all costs. Outside the estate, Savannah continued to buzz with speculation, though the details of the wedding remained carefully hidden. The public saw only the outward appearance of propriety, the widow attending social gatherings, the young man fulfilling his duties on the estate. Yet beneath the surface, a profound truth had been claimed. The union, though secret, represented a triumph over societal constraints, a private victory against the relentless pressures of gossip, judgment, and expectation. The couple had created a space in which their love could flourish, a sanctuary. Untouched by the harsh eyes of Savannah society, the secrecy of their union allowed the relationship to deepen in ways that public scrutiny might have prevented. They shared moments of intimacy, planning, and quiet reflection, strengthening the bond that had been formalized in the chapel. Every private dinner, every conversation in the gardens, every shared task within the estate became a continuation of the vows they had exchanged, a reinforcement of commitment and understanding. The clandestine nature of their marriage, far from weakening it, added a layer of intensity and meaning that made each moment together precious beyond measure. Yet the knowledge of potential discovery was always present. The city remained a place of observation, and the risks of exposure were real and immediate. They had to navigate every interaction with care, balancing the desire for closeness with the necessity of discretion. Even the most mundane actions, walking through the gardens, attending to matters, speaking with staff, were approached with mindfulness, a careful choreography designed to protect the secret they had so carefully cultivated. This constant awareness, though challenging, reinforced the depth of their commitment and the courage required to sustain it. Over time, their union began to shape the very rhythms of daily life on the estate. The young man and the widow developed subtle routines, small signals, and quiet spaces in which they could interact freely. A glance across a room, a gesture while passing a book, a shared smile in the corridors. Each became a reaffirmation of the bond formalized in secrecy. The ordinary details of estate life were transformed into opportunities for connection, creating a private language understood only by the two of them. As the weeks and months passed, the consequences of the secret marriage began to manifest in unexpected ways. The couple found a renewed sense of purpose and resilience, strengthened by the challenges they had faced and the triumphs they had claimed. Their relationship, forged in fascination, tested by scandal and formalized in secrecy, had become a cornerstone of their lives. Every decision, every conversation, and every interaction now carried the weight of shared experience, mutual understanding, and the courage to defy societal expectation. The secret wedding was more than a ceremony. It was a statement of autonomy, love, and courage. It represented a reclamation of agency in a society determined to constrain both desire and freedom. In the quiet spaces of the estate, away from the judgmental eyes of Savannah, the couple could exist as they truly were, bound by choice and devotion rather than circumstance or expectation. The act of formalizing their union, though hidden from the world, became a powerful symbol of the human spirit's capacity to seek connection, intimacy, and fulfillment, even in the face of danger. In the weeks following the ceremony, they began to imagine a future together, navigating the complexities of their secret with a mixture of careful planning and hopeful anticipation. Every conversation about the estate, every shared task, and every moment spent together became infused with the knowledge of their commitment. The secret wedding had created a new reality, one in which they could pursue their bond without compromise, yet always aware of the delicate balance between love and discretion. The clandestine nature of their marriage imbued every moment with heightened intensity. Simple gestures, a brush of the hand, a look across the room, a whispered word, became deeply significant, reminders of the vows exchanged in the quiet chapel. The secrecy demanded vigilance, patience, and trust, yet it also allowed a depth of connection that public recognition might have diminished. In a world obsessed with appearances, they had carved out a sanctuary in which their love could flourish on its own terms. The secret wedding had transformed the lives of the widow and her companion, but the story did not end with their vows. What followed was a period of careful navigation, a time when love, secrecy, and survival intertwined in ways neither could have anticipated. The estate, once a symbol of wealth and rigid social hierarchy, became a haven of subtle rebellion, a place where two people had defied the conventions of their world and claimed a private truth that society could not touch. Every corner of the house, every garden path, every quiet chamber became infused with the reality of their bond, a bond that would shape the years to come. Pure life after the marriage required a delicate balance. The couple maintained appearances in public, fulfilling the obligations expected of their respective positions, yet every interaction was now underpinned by the knowledge of their secret. This dual existence demanded vigilance, intelligence, and patience. The widow could not openly express her love without risking scandal, and the young man had to navigate the dangerous intersection of loyalty, discretion, and devotion. Together, they developed an unspoken rhythm, a language of gestures, glances, and subtle actions that allowed them to communicate without words, preserving the intimacy of their connection while maintaining the facade of propriety. Over time, the secrecy of their union began to solidify into a deeper form of resilience. The risks they had taken created a bond forged through adversity, a trust that extended beyond emotion into strategy and survival. Every decision they made was influenced by the knowledge that discovery could bring ruin, yet they approached life with a quiet courage that strengthened both their relationship and their individual character. Each day became an exercise in patience, an exploration of the spaces between desire and discretion, and a testament to the power of love in the face of societal oppression. The estate itself, shaped by decades of history and wealth, became a silent witness to their live. Rooms that had once echoed only with the footsteps of servants now carried the subtler sounds of shared confidences and quiet laughter. The gardens, where they had once stolen moments together, became a sanctuary of reflection and planning, a place where the burdens of the outside world could be set aside. Even the smallest details, the arrangement of a vase, the placement of a book, the careful selection of meals, took on new meaning, becoming part of the private narrative of a love that existed beyond the eyes of Savannah society. Their marriage, though hidden, allowed them to grow in ways previously impossible. The widow, once constrained by wealth, social expectation, and the perception of propriety, began to exercise a new form of agency. She made decisions not only about the estate, but about her own life, guided by a renewed sense of purpose and autonomy. The young man, for his part, became a partner in more than name. He was a confidant, advisor, and equal in the management the estate, and the creation of a private world that reflected their shared values. Their love, initially sparked by fascination and desire, had matured into a deep respect, a mutual understanding, and a partnership that defied the rigid hierarchies of 19th-century Savannah. Yet the challenges of secrecy persisted. The couple had to navigate the constant threat of exposure, the relentless eyes of neighbors, and the whispered judgments of a society eager to uphold rigid standards. Every journey into town, every social engagement, and every encounter with outsiders required careful calculation. They relied on the most trusted members of the household for protection and discretion, ensuring that no inadvertent revelation could endanger the fragile sanctuary they had created. This vigilance became second nature, a quiet tension that underscored the intensity of their bond and reinforced the depth of their commitment. As the years passed, the story of the widow and her husband became a private legacy, passed down through subtle gestures, shared memories, and the careful preservation of documents, letters, and artifacts. They understood that their actions, though hidden from public view, carried significance for future generations. The estate became a repository of private history, a place where love, courage, and rebellion against societal constraints were immortalized in the quiet rhythms of daily life. Each decision, each interaction, each carefully guarded secret contributed to a narrative that would endure long after their own lives had ended. Their bond also had a profound impact on those around them. The household staff, who had witnessed their courage and discretion firsthand, developed a deep respect for the couple. Some were inspired by their defiance, while others were motivated to act with greater loyalty and care. The influence of the widow and her husband extended beyond their private world, shaping the values, attitudes, and behaviors of those who serve. Even in secrecy, their actions left an imprint, a subtle yet enduring influence on the community within the estate. The broader society of Savannah, unaware of the true nature of their marriage, continued to speculate and gossip. Yet, the couple's careful management of appearances allowed them to thrive despite the constant scrutiny. The widow's reputation remained intact, her social standing preserved, and the young man's presence on the estate continued without interruption. The delicate balance they maintained was a testament to their intelligence, foresight, and unwavering commitment to one another. In a world defined by rigid hierarchies and unforgiving judgment, they had carved out a space for freedom, love, and dignity. The secret marriage also had profound personal effects. The widow experienced a transformation in self-perception, recognizing her capacity for courage, desire, and agency. She discovered a strength she had not known existed, a resilience born of necessity and nurtured through experience. The young man, too, grew in confidence, wisdom, and emotional depth, shaped by the trust placed in him and the responsibility of maintaining both the estate and their secret. Together, they navigated a complex world, forging identities that balanced societal expectation with personal fulfillment, and creating a legacy that would endure in ways both visible and hidden. Children, if they came, would inherit not only the wealth and position of the estate but also the lessons of courage, discretion, and resilience. The story of their parents' love, hidden though it may have been, would shape the values and choices of the next generation. Even in secrecy, the act of claiming their union against the constraints of society became a model of integrity and determination, a reminder that love, when pursued with courage and wisdom, could transcend boundaries and endure beyond the scrutiny of the world. The couple also understood the importance of documenting their experiences. Letters, journals, and carefully preserved records became a private archive, a testament to the life they had created together. These documents, intended not for public consumption but for their own reflection and for the guidance of future generations, captured the depth of their connection, the challenges they had faced, and the courage required to maintain a love that society sought to suppress. Through these records, their story achieved a form of permanence, ensuring that the lessons and triumphs of their lives would endure even if the world around them remained unaware. In the quiet moments of reflection, they often considered the fragility of their situation. The world outside their estate remained unpredictable, and the threat of scandal was never entirely absent. Yet, they also recognized the strength they had gained through adversity. The trials they had faced had fortified their bond, deepened their understanding of one another, and revealed the profound resilience of the human heart. Every challenge encountered, every risk navigated, became part of the narrative of their lives, shaping them into individuals capable of sustaining a love that defied expectation and endured beyond the reach of conventional judgment. The story of the widow and her husband, though hidden from public view, had a transformative effect on their own sense of identity. They moved through the world with a quiet confidence, a sense of purpose rooted in the knowledge that they had claimed their destiny through courage, discretion, and mutual devotion. Their love, initially sparked by fascination and desire, had matured into a profound partnership, one that encompassed emotional intimacy, shared responsibility, and unwavering commitment. In this private reality, they discovered a freedom that the broader society could neither grant nor take away. As decades passed, the legacy of their union continued to shape the estate and the lives of those who inhabited it. The principles of loyalty, discretion, courage, and love became embedded in the culture of the household, influencing not only immediate descendants but also the extended network of individuals connected to the estate. The story of their courage, though secret, became a guiding principle, a quiet testament to the power of love and integrity in the face of societal constraint. Even as Savannah evolved, modernized, and changed with the passing of years, the story remained alive in private memory. The physical spaces, the estate, the gardens, the rooms once shared, held the echoes of their lives, a silent testimony to the union that had defied convention. Every stone, every tree, every carefully preserved artifact became a symbol of a love that had endured despite the world's constraints. Their legacy was both tangible and intangible, a combination of human resilience, devotion, and the courage to pursue happiness in defiance of expectation. Dr. In the final years of their lives, the widow Anne D. her husband reflected on the journey they had undertaken. They had faced judgment, scandal, and danger, yet they had prevailed through intelligence, discretion, and unwavering devotion. They had created a life that was theirs alone, a sanctuary in which love, respect, and partnership flourished. Their story, though untold to the world at large, remained a powerful example of the human capacity for courage, adaptability, and the pursuit of connection against the odds. Ultimately, the untold story of their legacy is a reminder of the complexity of human emotion, the constraints of society, and the enduring power of love. It is a story of individuals who defied expectation, who navigated peril with intelligence and care, and who created a life and union that was as profound as it was forbidden. In the quiet corners of the estate, in the hearts of those who witnessed their courage, and in the private documents that chronicled their journey, their story lives on, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of love in the face of adversity. Even today, their tale resonates with the timeless tension between societal expectation and personal desire, between risk and reward, between secrecy and authenticity. It is a story of bravery, devotion, and the profound lengths to which individuals will go to protect, preserve, and honor the love they share. Though Savannah may never fully know the depth of their secret, the legacy of the widow and her husband endures in the quiet, lasting impact of their choices, their courage, and their undying devotion to one another. Their story, hidden yet enduring, serves as a reminder that love, when pursued with integrity and bravery, can transcend the boundaries of circumstance, expectation, and societal judgment. It is a tale of hidden triumph, private resilience, and the enduring power of human connection, a story that continues to echo in the spaces they once inhabited and in the hearts of those who understand the courage it took to live it.